We have spent the last couple of videos talking about dwarvish ecology, psychology, matrimony, and many other things that end with the letter Y, but we're not done, not by a long shot. This video is part 3 of our take on what they don't tell you about dwarves, so if you haven't seen the other videos, here they are in order, go watch them. But if you have, then you will be delighted to know that today we're going to encroach on one of the most important parts of dwarvish community and structure. Today we're talking about dwarvish clans, the dwarvish language, and lastly dwarvish adventuring groups, which I know you guys want to know about. But as always, before we get into all that, this is Monster Classes 1, a Dungeons & Dragons supplement that I wrote myself, which allows you to play monsters as traditional Dungeons & Dragons classes. And here we got stats, racial abilities, and class features for the Succubus, the Deva, and the Ghost. Hey look, 5th edition has been out for a while and most of us have gotten to experience most classes already. Maybe it is time for something a bit more exciting, something new and unique. Now you can play as a Deva Angel from level 1 to level 20, all constructed by me, with many abilities gotten from the monster manual and from previous lore. Further, we have tables to better help you make your character and tons of lore for you to get into the right mindset to play your exciting new character. You should go over and click the link below in order to check it out and see it for yourself. Of course, it would greatly support the channel and the content that I produce. But I do want to point out that we also have another PDF, What They Don't Tell You About Dragon Hordes, where I went all out and giving you everything that you would ever need in order to deal with the aftermath of a dragon fight. I literally cover absolutely everything about skinning and looting a dragon. Man, if you were ever curious about what you could do with dragon blood according to the lore, you're gonna have your questions answered. We have content for what kind of spells you could do with dragon bones, dragon's eyes, and even their brains. It's wild. We have tons of magic items too, but I know what you find interesting. I know. I didn't just give you magic items that you could use against dragons, but also I added magic items that dragons could use against you. And of course, magic items that can be created using draconic parts, which of course was a big focus for this PDF. I also added dragon-related subclasses like the Giant Slayer Barbarian, the Dragon Hunter Ranger, and my personal favorite, the Great Worm Otherworldly Patron for the Warlock, where you can pledge yourself to a great dragon in exchange for power. There is so much content on this PDF. Check out our 2 PDFs by going over to the store. It is mrrhexxart.shop. Pretty simple, just mrrhexxart.shop and you will get there. You could also click the link in the description below or click this fancy button picture right here with the picture of the PDF. It'll take you there as well. So thank you so much for the support, and now back to the video. They say that the cornerstone of dwarf society is its sense of community, that the traditions that dwarves hold dear and the virtues that guide them are anchored in a rich culture that calls on familial, civic, and religious ties to bind the dwarf people together. So let's talk about that. As it is expected of any one species that lives in a fantasy world, you can tell what their ideals are by looking at the chief deity which they revere. In the case of dwarves, Muradin is both a leader and a father, one who allows the dwarves the independence that they crave while being stern when needed. A father keeps his house in order, but allows his children the ability to grow and mature at the same time. And just like that's what a dwarf looks to when it comes to their god, on the same vein, that is what a dwarf aspires to get from their leaders. Dwarvish kings are meant to love and care for their subjects, while also managing the ecosystem so as to not stifle happiness and disciplining those who break the rules. Now, you might think that this is what everyone should expect from their kings, and that might be right, but unlike human civilizations which are beholden to the word and might of their king, dwarves are taught from a very young age that there are expectations to be had about one's king, and that it is imperative to remind the king of what his duty is. In fact, it is exactly because of this why the idea of hereditary lineages amongst dwarves died a very long time ago. But to talk about leaders and kings, we first have to talk about clans, which is the actual organizational structure of the dwarvish community. Quote, "Clans are an ever-present factor of dwarven life. There are hundreds of clans, ranging from the largest, which spans the continent with clanholds in every major dwarf city, to the smallest, with only 100 members in a single city. From the time a dwarf is born, the clan is his home. He is raised by its members, has his cousins as his playmates, advances in his career and training through clan connections, often meets his future mate at clan meetings, and looks to his clan chieftain to lead warriors in battle and dispense justice in peace. every dwarf knows his connection to his clan, and what his family connection is to each of the important bloodlines within the clan, and thereby the degree of family connection he has with nearly every member of that clan. The clans fulfill an important function in dwarf society. Unlike in many human kingdoms, land and wealth are not what makes an individual important among dwarves. After all, land is too precious to be owned by any one person, and wealth is easily accessible to every dwarf. Economics is not a sufficiently delineating factor from which to form the basis of social classes. Instead, the clans fulfill that function, using the family hierarchy to create solidly defined rules for social interaction and the acquisition of personal power. End quote. So the way this hierarchy functions is actually very straightforward. Generally speaking, the oldest dwarf in your immediate family will be above you in this social hierarchy. This could be, for example, your father or even your grandmother, provided of course that they haven't gone senile. Then above them would be the clan chieftain. The clan chieftains only answer to the king of the nation in which they stand, if there is a king of course. And then, hypothetically speaking, the king would need to heed the high king, which would be the king of kings, or the ruler of the presumable dwarvish empire. Now, within this social structure, a person above you could call upon your service or your goods at any time, if the situation was deemed necessary. So, if you're a dwarf, your dwarvish father can indeed requisition goods from your store, legally if the situation warranted. Though typically this power is used not by family members, but instead by clans towards their members. And the idea is that a dwarf is expected to serve his clan in any way he can, whether it be with strength of arms, money, public service, or even marriage in many cases. So yeah, if your grandfather asked for you to take up arms to fight in his cause, you kinda have to do it. That is the dwarvish way of things. Quote, although the clan leaders do not believe in excessive intrusion into an individual's private life, they will not hesitate to take action if an individual's choices threaten the clan as a whole. By the same token, if something a dwarf can do will greatly benefit the clan as a whole, then the leaders will ask for that service without hesitation. End quote. Everyone works together to help the clan or the family, even when they would really rather not. But the thing is, dwarves do this happily, knowing that the rewards far outweigh the costs. See, and this is very important to understand about dwarvish culture and civilization, a human can just plant trees and farm crops. They can raise cattle and harvest eggs from their chickens. Humans can basically exist without really the help of anybody. They are very self-sufficient, as you all know. Dwarves cannot do this. You see, space underground is hilariously limited and resources are very scarce. The resources that dwarves have is tied to wealth, which of course they can trade, but trading with above ground villages takes a long time, and mining is a cooperative endeavor, not a single man's job. A community is important for the survival of each and every dwarf. A dwarf that is alone in a cave system is a dead dwarf. A human that is alone in the wilderness is a very happy human. Now, the benefit of a powerful clan is that you always have friends with common interests. You have people that know what they're doing, that are ready to offer you advice or grab an axe in your name if need be. Through the might of a clan, no dwarf is homeless. No elder dwarf is left to fend for itself. No dwarf ever goes hungry. It is all for one and one for all. Everyone is equal and everyone prospers. Quote, in addition, the clan is responsible for helping its members succeed in life, providing apprenticeships for young males and females. Any profession the clan members practice is available to those seeking tutelage, and those outside the clan are often available as well through clan connections. Clans often practice exchange programs wherein they send their youth to foster and train with another clan specialized in a given profession. Even romance is not beyond the clan's reach. Matchmakers are always ready to help dwarves who wish to marry within the families of the clan. End quote. Now, all dwarvish clans have a chief, someone who is the head of the organization. The chief is generally selected by popular vote, though the only ones allowed to vote in this election are the elders within the clan. Kings are mostly a thing of the past, though some still remain, and the reason you don't see them quite as often anymore is because a monarch is still beholden to its personal popularity and fitness to rule, because if they don't get those, they will simply be voted out. So as you can see, the ones who truly have the power here are the elders, who basically get to decide everything in dwarvish society. These would basically be dwarves of influence, wealth, and personal might, who most of all are old enough to be respected by everyone. It is through their votes that clan policy, laws, justice, and the chieftains or leaders or kings are shaped. And nowadays, clan elders are indeed even able to decide whether or not it is legal for certain dwarves to even marry one another, like we talked about it in our previous video. Though do keep in mind that this practice is seldom used anymore thanks to the dwindling birth rate of the dwarvish population. Now, the chieftain himself has its own set of jobs, of course. They participate in local government, they support the king if there is one, they collect tax revenues for the city, and ensure the protection of the members of the community. He's also supposed to perform as magistrate and mediator within the clan, basically settling minor disputes and arranging for the punishment of lawbreakers. In essence, he becomes the judge and jury for any minor crimes that happen within his jurisdiction. Things outside of his jurisdiction, like crimes that happen between clans for example, are instead dealt between the two chieftains. There are no rules as to how these mediations are supposed to happen between different clans, but it is simply left for the chieftains of each of these clans to basically just figure out what's best for each of them. If no agreement can be made, though, that's when the king would be supposedly able to intervene. But again, if there is one. Without a king to intervene, of course, as you can imagine, things can get very, very ugly very, very quickly, because that's just how dwarves are. Anyways, like I said, a clan chieftain does have full authority to make decisions on small and minor crimes. But when a bigger crime has been committed, things do get, of course, a bit more serious. For such events, trials must be done with at least 12 dwarven elders, none of whom can have any blood interest with the accused or the accuser. The verdicts can be either innocent, not proved, or guilty. In dwarvish culture, they don't really follow the doctrine of innocent until proven guilty. Instead, the assumption is that if you cannot prove that you are innocent, then you may or may have not done it. Now, that sounds like semantics, but it does matter to a dwarf. To a dwarf, its name is everything, and a not proved verdict is a permanent stain on their reputation. To top it off, dwarves who collect 6 not proved verdicts in their lifetime are exiled from the clan. And remember, dwarves live a long life, so you know, after a few hundred years, you may collect a few of those, so you want to avoid that at all costs. Guilty verdicts most times range from indentured service to the injured party to even death. There are not really any sentencing guidelines to this. It is all on the whims of the elders, who basically get to decide what your punishment will be for the crime that you have committed, so you better hope they're not angry with you. Now, there is no limit as to how long a chieftain can serve as clan leader, and it is typically held for life. There are times, though, when a chieftain can nominate a successor when and if he retires, and in such events, generally speaking, the elders will respect and agree with the decision unless there is some massive disagreement about the prospect. But again, at any point in time in the future, the elders can just vote out the leader, and it is as easy as that, though it is also a power that the elders really don't want to abuse too much. It doesn't happen very often. They generally try to mediate things without resorting to using that level of power. That is because strong disagreements tend to weaken or shatter clans, and dwarves don't take slights or insults lightly, as you all know, so it pays to be very careful and very reserved. Quote, "For large clans with multiple scattered holds, ambassadors from each hold gather together once every 10 years to decide on any new policies for the clan and to ensure that no abuse of clan holdings or resources take place. This occasion is known as a gathering. At each such event, the clan pledges anew its fealty to the king, or declares its independence, decides to declare war or sue for peace, and makes any other important policy decisions. A gathering can be called on short notice because of some perceived emergency, but the need must be great, or many holds will simply not attend." End quote. Now, here's the fun question. What happens to a dwarf that has been exiled, or one who happens to not be on a clan? Well, first of all, keep in mind that generally speaking, a clan owns the town, a settlement, or even the whole city, so not being in a clan might be tantamount to not having citizenship in that city. Basically, normally you would get expelled, and like we talked about it before, dwarves can't really just exist on their own underground without the support of a strong community, so these dwarves either find another clan that is willing to take them, which is rare, or go topside and live amongst humans. Now, if you're a dwarf and you happen to be kicked out of a clan that exists on a really big city or in a kingdom where there would be multiple clans operating in a single location, so you wouldn't be just banished, then the clanless person would simply live in the poorest sections of the city. Often that would be the industrial district near the businesses. Those dwarves are, however, considered to be some of the lowest in the social hierarchy of their society, the lowest of the low. Now, the interesting thing that happens, however, is that typically it is these kinds of dwarves, the clanless, that inevitably take up adventuring, since statistically speaking, these would be the dwarves that normally shave under traditional dwarvish culture. And that's actually why so many established dwarvish holds tend to be very suspicious of adventuring dwarves, since they assume that they have been banished or are clanless, and hence probably are rebels or criminals. Quote, because they are suspected to be misfits at best and criminals at worst, any offers of hospitality to clanless dwarves are usually made with one hand outstretched and the other resting meaningfully on the nearest weapon. No dwarf will turn away another in need, but the clanless typically receive a much shorter invitation and much less comfort than any other. Because of this treatment, some groups of clanless dwarves are rumored to have set up surface freeholds in the style of their clan cousins. Since no clan members would be invited to such a place, however, much less willingly set foot inside it, the rumors are difficult to substantiate, end quote. Now, this applies to random dwarvish adventurers, especially those that are found without an adventuring name or banner and are traveling especially with non-dwarves. There is a term of specialized adventuring dwarves. These are called brotherhoods, and these function a bit different since they tend to make a name for themselves, names that dwarven clans recognize. These brotherhoods do gain a semblance of respect and even special treatment from many dwarf clans, since they travel across the land and perform heroic acts in the name of dwarves. They are effectively outside of the jurisdiction of any one clan, and many have members from many different clans as part of their adventuring group. But yeah, typically we're talking about groups that are comprised entirely of dwarves that would form what we call a brotherhood, not a traditional adventuring group for sure. Alright, so that's that for clans. We still have one more topic to go through, and that is language. This one's gonna be fun. So the Dwarvish language is technically separated into two different forms, not that dissimilar from how in Japanese you can learn either hiragana or katakana. One form is called the Elder language, which is basically the root of many other languages that evolved from it, including the Orcish, Gnomish, Goblin, Terran, and even the language that the Giants use. The Elder language is in fact even older than the Elvish language, and it is even through this language where the name Faerun came to be. Now, the thing about the Elder language is that it is a long and very complicated vocabulary with a lot of superfluous letters that normal dwarves don't even bother learning anymore. Dwarf children are actually not even taught this language anymore. The only ones that use it at this point are record keepers who use it to make sure that they retain its knowledge for prosperity's purpose. In any case, the second form of the Dwarvish language, which is the one that dwarves actually learn to use when they're children, is the one that typically is called Dethek, though technically the term Dethek, which you might have heard before, is supposed to be used only for the script, not for the language itself. Quote, Dwarven is a very pragmatic language. It has few words for high ideals or theories, making it ill-suited for discussing research or philosophy. For dwarves who practice such esoteric disciplines, such as sages and wizards, much of their professional terminology has been adopted wholesale from the common or elven tongues. Dwarven religious lessons are told largely as parables, legends hiding moral truths for the edification of the listener, since the language does not lend itself well to sermons. Dwarven reflects emotional states very well, giving dwarf skalds a richly varied palette from which to paint their verbal pictures. This focus on the pragmatic and immediate over the esoteric and eternal often carries over into other languages that were highly influenced by Dwarven. Where Dwarven really shines, however, is in an engineering or industrial setting. The language allows for a fine degree of differentiation between physical objects or types of similar objects, as well as describing various processes. Many scholars have surmised that the gnomes' attention to descriptive detail can be traced back to this aspect of the language, given their similar roots. Although Although most base words in Dwarven are short and to the point, 1 or 2 letter modifiers are typically added to both the beginning and the end of the word to add more detail. Most of the longer Dwarven words are a result of this modification and can hold a surprisingly complex level of description. Spoken Dwarven often sounds gruff to surface dwellers. It is consonant heavy, taking on a glottal quantity when spoken harshly or in anger. It can be very melodious, however, with an inherent rhythm and balance that is pleasing to the ear." End quote. There is, however, basically no recreational Dwarvish literature, since Dwarvish culture is extremely social and it is frowned upon for a dwarf to be reclusive reading books on its own. Plus, most of its history, teachings, and religion's doctrine is basically just spread out orally and not through holy text. In spite of all of this, though, most of Dwarvish society is literate. Now, what makes this language particularly interesting is the way in which it is written, since, as you're all very well aware of, a Dwarvish script is known for being found in stone, not particularly in paper. Dwarves don't really like having the things that they create be perishable or otherwise easily destroyable, and writing, in this case, is no different. Stone walls, pillars, cairns, and standing stones all over the realms today bear the Dethek runes of the dwarves. For Dethek writing purposes, instead of a clean sheet of paper, dwarves use what we know as runestones, described as flat and circular or diamond-shaped, about an inch thick, and made of hard and durable rock. This, for example, is a runestone. You can write on either one or both sides of it. Words are inscribed into it in what you can see as a ring or spiral shape that starts from the outside and then circles inward, ending at the middle. The spiral in text will most often circle a specific symbol in the middle, which ironically functions also kind of like Japanese. The Japanese have a third form of language called the kanji. Kanji are symbols which represent entire words or sometimes even entire phrases. As such is the case with the specific symbol that dwarves craft to be in the middle of a runestone. See, the way it is supposed to work, for example, is you might have a runestone where the text inscribed in it might tell, the story of a lone warrior who stood fiercely against many enemies and then died as a hero. The symbol in the middle might be the symbol for history, at which point you would understand as a reader that this is supposed to be then a historical text that depicts an event that actually happened in the past. On another example, the symbol could be instead the symbol of a warning or a symbol for danger, at which point you would understand as a reader that this story is meant to be more of a description of what could happen to you if you were to continue down this path. The runestone in the middle can be anything really, as long as it gives context to what is written around it. It can be something as simple as the emblem of whoever wrote the runestone, or maybe a clan insignia to designate that this area is clan territory. Sometimes instead of a single symbol, the middle of the runestone will instead be a drawing that represents what is written in there. So a really cool legend might have a climactic rendition of the events in the story drawn as part of the rune. Now this rune in here, for example, is written in the literal Dethek language, which is canon. So we actually know exactly what this says. It says, "This place is Duris Bridge. Here 42 of the best warriors of," now this here is the symbol for the House of Helmung, "fell to keep orcs from the halls. We slew 608. This number here is 218, which means the day. And then the number here means 377, which means the year since the founding of the kingdom." The central rune here of a hammer basically identifies the rider as a warrior. The shield indicates that he was of the House of Helmung. Now, the warrior's name, which is Nain, is written as it is customary above the shield, which represents the clan. If the dwarf was well known and of great importance, then he would use his own rune instead of his name, because then everyone would understand what the rune means. As you can see, they don't really use any punctuations in the script, and sentences are basically just separated by lines crossing the script. Words are separated by spaces, and capital letters have a horizontal line over them. Numbers enclosed by boxes are meant to be dates, the day always preceding the year. Most often than not, nothing is painted and the script is left in its natural rocky form, but when color is used, then the standard is to always color the names in red, while the rest are either colored black or simply left uncolored. That way you know what is a name or what is a noun. Quote, "Runestones can serve as genealogies and family burial markers, portable tombstones to which additions are added each time a new burial is made in a family crypt. They can also serve as inventories of the wealth of a clan, family, or brotherhood, as private messages, and as records of great events and deeds of valor, end quote. But yeah, there you have it, our third video on dwarves, and with this we have basically covered mostly everything. I mean, there's stuff that I haven't covered. Realistically, there's just no way that I will be able to obviously cover everything. And at this point in time, I have written so many scripts on this, guys, and done so much research that it is kind of hard for me to even think about what I have talked about and what I haven't. But here, let me cover quickly a few things that I didn't really have the time to add. For example, did you guys know that dwarves and gnomes share a kinship between each other, whereas gnomes are basically considered an ancestral cousin to the dwarves? In fact, many dwarves believe that gnomes used to be dwarves in the past, before their form was changed by the gods. You also probably didn't know that the dwarves that live their entire life underground within their isolated dwarf holds are deadly afraid of big open waters. They can handle underground springs pretty well, but you tell them to go swim on a big lake and they will lose it out of fear. Further, dwarves don't actually have any god that possesses power over water. It is effectively one of the greatest dwarvish weaknesses. Technically, if you're a dwarf cleric, you're not even supposed to pick spells that have to do with water because of this. Also, dwarves have a thing in their brain that lets them know how far underground they are in respect to the surface. So they always know while walking through tunnels if they're going up or if they're going down, which is actually a surprisingly difficult thing for other humanoids to notice. There is so much content to go through, and we haven't even talked about religion much, which is, in fact, the topic for our next and last video on dwarves. We will talk about Moradin, the chief god of the Dwarven pantheon and one of the most powerful gods in Dungeons and Dragons, so very excited about that. It's gonna be a blast, so stay tuned. I would like to thank my Patreon supporters Barry Mascant, 5e Magic Shop, Morgan Johnson, Rusty Rain, Doc Feeder, The Great Codini, Omega Scales, Terry Culp, Benjamin Bosters, Falky951, Ordoric, Sabim Korshap, Thomas Hunt, Stephen, Soulless Rider, Lost Crusader, Stalia, Treb909, Trevor Hess, George Fortland, The Living Guild Pack, Describe, Herbert Johnson, The Wizard's Vault, James the Perverted, Shuddycast, Lucas Cyrek, Naktor Ashura, Jesse Feliciano, Brian Camp, Chad Aga, John Harley, John the Wicked, Shane and Sam Skinner, Warren Smith, Baruch, Alyssa Kestrel, Kristen Coleman, Lactose the Intolerant, Holy Fi, Flame Black 200, Murden Games, and Uthmoney10 for supporting me on Patreon at the $25 level. If you would like to support me as well, then please head on over to patreon.com/MrRex to support. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. Of course, make sure to check the PDF. It's really good, I promise you. And we will see you all next time real soon.